This, and excuse the traffic in the background, this is Frocarpus Graciliar. So this is Fern Pine we're looking at. It's not really a pine, it's just a name that was given to it because the needle-like leaves. Very common hedge plant around Santa Barbara and also planted as trees. This is a whole bunch of them right across the street from the Santa Barbara County Emergency Operations Center. Characteristics of these is the very kind of fine, fuzzy look to the tree, a light green new growth, small, like 2-inch long needle-like leaves that we'll get a closer look at. These are dioecious, so there are males and females of these trees, and the females will have the fruits on them, which are these small, probably about dime size, a little bit bigger, yellow fruits that aren't really you can't eat them and they don't smell that good, but those are the fruits. But they have a nice shape. They're very hardy and disease resistant. Here's one that has a really nice conical shape, and they can live for a long time. There's some over 100-year-old ones here in Santa Barbara. Let's get up close and look at the actual needles. So I think one thing that people like about these is you can just see how full and lush the foliage is. It's very thick, so it makes a nice screen. That's part of what makes it a hedge plant if you keep it small when it's young. But the light green new growth, maybe an inch and a half long. These also are gymnosperms, that's why they're in this unit, and they also have cones, but the cones are very different looking than other things. Frocarpus used to be called Podocarpus. It means the fruit has a little foot. The fruit sits on a little thing called an aril, which is a foot, and there aren't any to show you here, but is a distinctive part of the Podocarpi or the Frocarpus as well. But again, important to know because it's a common hedge plant. More common planted as a tree in Santa Barbara and Southern California, Western United States, in maybe 20 years ago and before. But very hardy, like I said, disease resistant, pretty drought tolerant. Out here they're not getting any more water. And they look verdant, they look full and lush. So that's often something that designers are looking for, a plant that is hardy and doesn't take a lot of water, but looks like it could be a lush plant growing in a wet area. There you go. Frocarpus Graciliar. Okay, I want to show you another plant. Not this beautiful bougainvillea, which are everywhere, but on the way tell you a story. So this set of videos I'm doing this morning are all around my house, and it reminds me of being a lazy botanist. You just kind of do what's right around you. But another joke my friends and I used to have as botanists working for the Forest Service is say we like to do car botany, where you just drive around and you never leave your car, you just identify plants from the comfort of your air-conditioned car. That's car botany. Try it around town. Hopefully you have an electric car and you don't have to feel guilty. Okay, on with the real plant. This is a nice hedge of Frocarpus Graciliar. I showed you what the trees look like in another video, or if you haven't seen that yet, go to that. This is a really nice hedge. So there's a garage, a driveway, and every time you cut it back, it gets this flush of light green new growth on the edge, on the outer surface. It really is pretty, and right here it's catching the morning light. So they make a great hedge plant. It's got an oleander next to it. And then there's another one right in here, just kind of filling a little spot against the garage. That's another hedge of the Frocarpus Graciliar. Now, one of the Podocarpuses, another Podocarpus called Elatus, and we are doing that one as well. I'm just walking here. That one is also a really popular hedge plant too. It makes a nice hedge. It has longer leaves, so it doesn't look quite as compact, but it's still very nice. And there's that redwood in the distance. All right. And now I am sneaking around the county building here on Calle Real. What you're looking at here is a nice specimen of the Norfolk pine or Norfolk Island pine or star pine. It's Araucaria heterophylla. This is an old one and a large one, but you can still, if you look closely, maybe not at this picture, I'll show you another one of a younger one, specimen. But all the branches come off in tiers. So you have a set of branches at one height, and then a space and another set. So very regular branching pattern. You can kind of see that near the bottom here. We'll get a little bit closer. These are in the class of kind of like the monkey puzzle trees. There's Araucaria bidwillii in this unit too. There's this one, Araucaria heterophylla, and there's a couple more that grow around town. They were planted more 50 to 100 years ago. They were really popular in the Victorian era. There's a big one that gets lights put on it on Ralph's on Chapala Street. Every winter time they put the Christmas lights on it, or holiday lights I should say. So this is the star pine, really kind of unusual tree, and I'll get you another photo of a young one where the star shape of the branching pattern is really distinct and really kind of neat. Here's a nice younger version of the star pine. If you look at the top, you can see that star shape. There's like 6 branches that come out at each tier all the way down to the bottom. As it gets older, the lower limbs die off a little and the top ones get bigger, so it doesn't look quite so nice and conical. But really beautiful symmetry in this Norfolk Island pine, star pine, Araucaria heterophylla. All right, here we are at another species. This is Cedrus deodara. It's the Deodor Cedar. So it's the pine tree-ish, not really a pine, but it looks like one to the layperson behind this red fence. And the thing that is distinctive about the Deodar Cedar is they're very graceful. You can see the branches that go out kind of at a 45-degree angle, and the tips of the branches, if you look closely, they hang downwards. They're kind of like a dainty little look to the ends of the branches. It's grayish blue, has a nice conical shape. This one's about 25 feet tall. Unfortunately, you don't have a nice clear background behind it, but look close at the tips, the very top of it and the tips of all the lateral branches, how they just gently hang down a little bit at the ends. That's the Deodar Cedar. If you look at another one, we'll go across the street here, this is a big old one. Lower branches have died off or been pruned off. It doesn't have that dangly look, so these are a little bit harder to see. I have one in my house and I thought it was just a cedar. Not the Deodar Cedar, but an Atlas cedar for a while, until an arborist told me, no, when they get older and they're pruned poorly, they lose their graceful shape and they kind of look like this, hacked up. One last little bonus one I want to throw in here is the fern pine. Look at this big billowy tree here. This is the Frocarpus Graciliar, a giant one, probably 50 to 70 years old. And they are as hardy as heck. They grow kind of almost like a big thundercloud would grow on top, just kind of billowing out in big puffs, round puffs, or how the leaves come out. But really pretty one, just wanted to show you that while we are studying the Deodar Cedar. Back to this one. These giant columnar plants here, this is Cupressus sempervirens stricta, or the Italian cypress. So Cupressus is cypress genus. Let me back up a little bit. See, almost as tall as those palm trees right behind it. So these are 2 or 3 of this Cupressus sempervirens, and the cultivar is stricta, meaning its form is strict, meaning this nice columnar, the branches kind of go straight up, it doesn't spread out, it stays very tight. And these are not actually native to Italy, but they became very popular in Italy, and so thus they're called the Italian cypress. So those are some older ones, and if we get closer without trespassing, you can see the yellowish kind of golden colored cones that are on these plants too. So they are still gymnosperms. They have cones instead of flowers. And let me just walk down here and I'll show you some younger ones here at this more hip house. They have a little bit more updated landscaping. You can see two of them there. Nicely placed, like little sentinels, very compact, columnar, strict. That's the Italian cypress. And it's interesting too when I started to go look around for plants in this unit, I realized a lot of the gymnosperms are not as currently popular in landscaping. They're a little bit more old school. So I had to think of older neighborhoods, which this one looks like it was built around in the 50s and 60s. So there's a lot of junipers and a lot of gymnosperms. And although you're not going to be planting a lot of them as a landscaper, here's some more of the junipers as a hedge, you'll often inherit homes and clients that have these on there from a while back. So you still need to know how to take care of them and identify them and things like that. Cycus revoluta. Cycus revoluta. Sago palm. This is a big clumping bunch of it. Often you'll see them with a little bit of a trunk when they get older, and then this big spray of leaves. It looks like a big fern, but when you get up close and touch it, these leaves are really thick and leathery and pokey. Also, another one of the species that was around during the Mesozoic, the dinosaurs, that had survived through that time because it was so thick it was inedible to vegetarian and omnivorous reptiles back then. What you see too is it's clumping, so you get branches, suckers coming out the bottom, forming this big clump on the corner of this road here, turnpike. Oh, there's a political sign. If you get in closer, you can see in this one, I want to be discreet, but there's the female cone. This is cone producing also. It is a gymnosperm. That's the female cone, and later it will produce large seeds. There's a male cone too, which is much taller and more cylindrical. But again, you're seeing a bunch of different branches off of this one. It looks like this one here is the tallest. You can see at the very top. Thick, linear. These are compound leaves, compound pinnate, and they're very linear, each of these leaflets, and thick and hard. I'm tugging at it really hard. There's another one we're going to see, which is the bread palm, which looks similar. It's a cycad also. This is considered a cycad. But the leaves are wider and have a little bit of a point on the bread palm. So this is the sago palm, not a true palm, but it's called that because of its form, Cycus revoluta. Oh, this is a good find. Not easy to find the ginkgo tree around town. They're kind of rare, but they're very beautiful and special, I would say. So the Gingo Biloba, or ginkgo tree, is one of our few trees in this town that actually exhibit some kind of fall color. This is getting kind of a golden hued leaves as they age, and it is deciduous for the most part. These are ancient trees. The fossil records show them to be around during the dinosaur era. We have a couple on campus. They're very pretty, and so where they get their name from is the leaf has two lobes. Let's look at this one closely. You can see how there's a little notch in the middle, so it's bilobed leaf. Believe it or not, these are gymnosperms. They have cones instead of flowers and fruits. That's how they reproduce, just like the pine trees and the cedars and the cypresses, junipers. Also, when these first became popular, they were planted as street trees all over in major cities. They're very tolerant of carbon monoxide from car exhaust, and they're just a really hardy and beautiful tree. And then the fact that they turn color, like if you're in the Midwest or the East Coast, these are just beautiful, brilliant yellow in the fall, kind of like cottonwoods or aspen that we get in the West. But people didn't know that they're dioecious, so there's male plants and female plants like cannabis. And the females produce these cones that are really like a big kind of squishy berry. And when they drop, it smells like baby diapers. I mean, it's really stinky. So it took about 10 years for municipal, like cities and things to realize, oh no, we planted males and females, and the females are making our whole city stink. And so they stopped planting the females, and they only market the males pretty much. It's harder to find a female ginkgo tree. Of course, you know about ginkgo's purported qualities of if you take a ginkgo, extract leaves and roots and fruits, that it can help your memory. Okay, for our next one, I'm trying to be quiet because I'm in my neighborhood and people are sleeping. This is the Monterey Cypress, Hesperocyparis macrocarpa. It's a kind of a young one, but it's in pretty good condition. There used to be a lot more of these around Santa Barbara when we had more fog and the climate was cooler, and they're dying off because of that. They like the cool, foggy weather, especially in the summer. The fog keeps them from getting too stressed from the drought. But let's get a little closer. Hesperocyparis. So macrocarpa, the genus name, comes from the large carp, meaning fruit, or carpels. Those are the part of the ovaries. And you can see them on this one. I think these people are sleeping right there. So you can see those cones right there. They're large. They're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches diameter, and produced in a bunch of different areas. But if you've ever seen pictures of Monterey Cypress, they're really neat and kind of get windswept looking near the coast, but they have these branches that stick outward and form kind of like horizontal layers almost on the tree. They give it a kind of a really neat look, almost like it's following the lines of the land horizontally above the land. There's an older one down the street a little ways, and you can see the silhouette of it kind of nicely. It has a little bit more of the older shape, and it's going up and then going horizontal more than up. If you looked really close, which I don't think I can get close enough with this camera, but it has scales, not needles, but scales. Again, this is a gymnosperm. The leaves on gymnosperms are either scale-like, little scales just like on a fish or a lizard, that's actually one leaf that lies flat against the stem, or other gymnosperms will have needles like the pines, or even all-shaped, which is like a little pricker. Another indication this is a Monterey Cypress is the trunk. This long, linear, grayish, fissured bark, which is thought to be attractive. We can see it even better on this one if I go down a ways. I'm in the middle of the road, so hopefully a car won't come take me out. So here you can see kind of how the branching really wants to go horizontal. Real close here. This is just classic Monterey Cypress bark. Really pretty long, vertical, linear, grayish lines going up, and that is a nice contrast with the horizontal branching. So Hesperocyparis macrocarpa. Look for the overall shape, the bark, and the large fruits, or cones, I should say. Now, here I am at another county building, the air conditioner going in the background. I feel like I'm sneaking around here. There's no one here, and I don't have a mask on. I don't recommend doing this. Anyways, what we're looking at here are two different cultivars of Juniperous Chinensis. In the background, the tall one is Juniperous Chinensis Kaizuka, Hollywood twisted juniper. It's got those kind of twisty ends of the branches going up and out. It almost looks like they're growing underwater, like magic rocks or something at the top. Those are old school junipers planted, and appropriately here, for larger buildings. Often in Hollywood, they were planted on large municipal buildings, and we have them around City College campus as well. Hollywood twisted juniper, Juniperous Chinensis Kaizuka in the background. Foreground is the bluish version of Juniperous Chinensis Pfitzerana. And this is Pfitzerana glauca. Glauca means whitish blue. I always think of that as like the glauc root in Latin means kind of milky white. So what we're looking at here in the foreground, look a little closer, is this Pfitzerana glauca of the Juniperous Chinensis. Juniperous Chinensis, this Pfitzerana glauca, and the one that is not whitish blue, just Pfitzerana, they both have these branches where the tips kind of stick out at about a 45-degree angle on top. These are also kind of old school, planted a lot in the 50s and 60s around homes. I call them, I'm pretty old, so I call them the Brady Bunch plant. It's the landscaping around some of the TV shows I watched when I was a kid. So they're pretty though. They're very hardy, very disease resistant. They don't need much water. They're not nice to touch, they're prickly, but the color is nice. And they've done a good job here by kind of contrasting almost the limey green color of the Kaizuka and this Pfitzerana glauca. And if we walk this way and we don't get caught by security, I will show you the Pfitzerana, just plain Pfitzerana, not the glauca. So here in the background, well, now the foreground, this is the Juniperous Chinensis Pfitzerana. So it's the same shape. These are younger ones that are not as big, but the same kind of 45-degree angled branches poking out on the top. A juniper, as you would know it, but not bluish white, just kind of straight green, evergreen green. These ones have lots of leaves kind of dropped in them and caught in them, but they make a pretty, hardy and thick hedge if you'd like that. There you go, Juniperous Chinensis Pfitzerana. All right, here is an example of Nephrolepsis Cordifolia. Nothing extremely special or unique about this fern, except that it's a very hardy, common fern, planted often in areas that are north-facing on a building where it's kind of cooler, shadier, moister. They grow like this, and then this is a small clump, but they can get massive and they need to be cut back. But the characteristic long, very linear frond. These are compound leaves, each of them, and this one has a very consistent width from the base all the way to the top. If you look on the back, sometimes you will see the sori, or the places where the spores are produced. I don't see any on this at all. Actually, I do see them. If you get real close, you can see those little brown spots. That's where the spores are produced. So these aren't gymnosperms, but I threw a few ferns into this group because they are also unique in the sense that they do not produce seeds or cones or flowers. They produce spores as a way of reproduction. They're a nice kind of addition, a hardy plant, like I said, but you throw it under a tree that's shady, a little bit of moisture. They're kind of a nice filler plant. Of course, they give kind of a wet look because they're ferns. This is the sword fern due to the long, consistent width shape of the frond. Here's yet another pine in the same general vicinity as the one we've just looked at, the Pinus pinea, or if these are out of order, it's nearby. So let's quickly scan over to the Pinus pinea. Those really vertical, bottle brush-like new growths on the ends of the stems. The needles are fairly short. Now back to this one, Pinus canariensis, Canary Island pine. If you can tell, these needles are much longer, and the new growth on the ends of the stem are not like a bottle brush. They're more like a fiber optics, kind of light, where there's just a big spray of needles all fountaining out in every different direction. So they have a very kind of fuzzy look to them overall. And the needles actually, we'll get closer in a sec, but they hang down. So they spray out, and they're flexible, and so the needles are so long they kind of dangle. If you look close enough here, you might see them kind of dangling in the wind. So the Canary Island pine, native to the Canary Islands, and someone saw it and thought, this is a cool pine, let's enter it into the horticulture industry, and it's now planted all over semi-arid and arid areas of the world. A lot of our Canary Island pines in Santa Barbara and Southern California are dying from a blight, but some of them are still around. We've got a few on campus. Let me get up a little closer to it. They have a neat branching pattern too. It's not as simple as the Italian stone pine, but kind of candelabra. I mean, the branches come out and arch upwards on the tips. You can kind of see how this branch comes out and then arches upwards. Let's go real close to the needles. I'm going to put my hand in there. You can see how long the needles are. They're like 10 to 12 inches or more long. And they dangle, they bend. You can see them kind of arching over. So very long and dangling, kind of fuzzy looking overall tree. If we get real close, well, I can scan down to one of the cones here on the ground. You know, it's just kind of the typical pine cone. Some of the pines we look at will have characteristics of the pines that are important to know, characteristics of the cones that are important to know and distinctive. This one, not really. I wouldn't use it. It's the long needles that kind of dangle. That's what's going to be distinctive about Pinus canariensis. This pine is the Aleppo pine, Pinus halepensis. This one tends to branch low to the ground, so you see that's a couple of feet off the ground there on the trunk where it starts to branch. That's typical of the Aleppo pine. Aleppo is if you don't know, a city in Syria. So this is native to that region. But the way that I identify Aleppo pine, the way I know it's what it is, when I came out here, this is the end of my street here on El Sueño Road. You can hear all the traffic on Foothill. But the way that I know it's Aleppo pine is looking at the cones. So the cones are persistent, meaning there's a lot of them left on the tree, that they're always there. They stay for a few years, whereas other pines, the cones fall off annually. Let's look closely at some of these cones. So just to give you, here's my hand. These are about 4 to 5 inches long. Sorry if it's not too clear. The younger cones, let's see if we can find some younger cones. Well, this is a good, just kind of silhouette. But these are about 3 to 5 inches long also. And the ones that are hanging down, like this one, they tend to kind of look like a jalapeno. And they're often green on the tree for a while, so Pinus halepensis, I joke around and say Pinus jalapeno. So it's got the cones that are persistent, and they are narrow, and they often hang downward and are green. And the tree branches low. The pine needles aren't horribly different than some of the other pines, so that wouldn't be a characteristic. It's mostly looking at the shape of the cone and the branching pattern. And also one other distinctive trait about the jalapeno pine, or the Pinus halepensis, is the bark. It's kind of flaky and scaly looking. You know, not big, deep fissures, but more like flaky, almost like burnt potato chips on the outside of the tree. It's Pinus halepensis. This tree you're looking at is Pinus pinea, Italian stone pine. I'm doing this video myself, so I'm not going to be in it, but you might see some little sprites running around behind it. It's my daughter. So the Italian stone pine, this is a fairly young one, but it's still got the characteristic form, which is very umbrella shaped. You can see there's a main trunk, and then the branches start coming out, and it is very wide. So it tends to be wider in the canopy than it is tall, which makes it a really nice, like I said, umbrella shape for shade, planting under. Just the shape is really attractive, and the branching pattern. These get very large. They line Anapamu Street, like right by the high school, Santa Barbara High. Those were all planted, an old Spanish ranch and estate That used to be the driveway Anapamu Street up this ranch, so those trees have been maintained and replaced to give that look. One way to identify this is the shape, this really umbrella shaped. We've got a few of them on campus, but also if you look more closely at the tops, so like the new growth. The new growth, they kind of look like green bottle brushes, how the needles come out at the very tops. You can see it on that one too if you look closely. And this one too, just looking close at one. See how they're really vertical and all the needles are just sticking out kind of like a bottle brush. That's Italian stone pine. The cones aren't going to help you identify this one too much. They're kind of generic and they're not persistent, meaning they fall off. So this is a very young Italian stone pine, so it doesn't even have, you can't even see the trunk yet, but a little bit older. This is probably about 25 years old at the most. And people will cut the lower branches off to give them even more of a simple, kind of elegant architecture of branching and single trunk look. But yeah, these are really neat, and you can see them if you look up pictures of them, old ones. There's one across the street from City College that goes up probably about 30 or 40 feet of just trunk, and then it branches out in this wide canopy. Really cool. Italian stone pine, Pinus pinea. Okay, the next one here, not that easy to get a shot of. This is right outside my house, my neighbor's house. They happen to have a redwood tree that's pretty happy looking. Sequoia sempervirens. So redwood trees in this area usually don't look so good because we have low summer fog. The redwood trees grow naturally. The southernmost area they get to is Cambria because they have consistent summer fog there. They make it through the dry, hot California summers by catching fog, and that keeps them moist and the soil moist. So a lot of them around town here, it's just not wet enough and they look kind of droopy. We'll get close up in just a second. So let's get close up to a branch. I'm gonna pull one down so you can look at it closely, but here's the flat sprays of needles. These are simple leaves growing in flat sprays, like I said, and they keep growing out the tips. That's a redwood tree branch. I don't see any cones that are being produced on this tree, but they do exist. They're small, somewhat like the Monterey Cypress. This is another one here. Of course, the most distinctive thing about the redwood tree is the red wood. So you can see there, this is another neighboring tree with the beautiful sunlight shining through. Let's get a little closer so you'll have that sunlight. That is the red bark, the red wood, and interior of the wood is also red. This is, I think it's been called a wolf ring or a fairy ring, when you can see that you can see 3, but there are 4, and there were 6 sprouts, all tree trunks all growing right next to each other. This is where you have the main tree somehow fell down, and then there were resprouts from the roots, and they grow up into this almost like a ring of resprouts, and this is 4 of those resprouts that have gotten very large. But the best thing to identify the redwood tree is by the reddish bark and wood, the flat sprays of needles, and the overall shape. And I'm going to walk you down the driveway just a little bit to show you the overall shape of an unhealthy looking redwood tree. There's all kinds of other things on the way that we'll try to ignore. These other beautiful plants that us horticulturalists just bounce all over the place trying to identify everything. But one time when I lived in Big Bear, worked for the Forest Service, my friends and I, my botanist friends and I, made it a point to know every single plant on the way to work as we drove to work, and we did it except for maybe a couple. So down in the distance there, see that conical shaped tree with the ends of the branches kind of hanging down? That's also a redwood, but it's not very happy. Branches shouldn't be hanging down like that. The tips kind of look burnt, meaning by wind or sun desiccation. So trees, those redwood trees will grow here, but they're really not looking great and in their full vigor. So there you go, Sequoia sempervirens, the redwood tree, the California state tree. I'm here on Yananali Street down below City College to show you a really nice large specimen of the Taxodium Henckels Montezuma cypress. There's one on campus by the biology building. There's another video of that. This is just a large street tree specimen. Really looks good too. And these condos are younger than the tree, so you can see those condos are 2 stories high. So this is like, 4 or 5 story, 60, 75 feet. Taxodium Henckels. All of the branch endings are hanging down. It's kind of one of the weeping forms of this tree. Now closer to the train station, we've got an Araucaria bidwillii, the bunya bunya tree. Next to what looks like is, on the right, is a younger star pine. It's gotten large. So they're kind of mixed together here. But what I want you to see is the crown of the bunya bunya is rounded. It's a rounded dome at the top. That's how it grows when it gets larger. The branches get longer and it kind of forms, not really umbrella, more like a little bit of a narrow mushroom. Big, thick trunk. And you can also see, one of the reasons it's sometimes called monkey puzzle, is it kind of looks like those little, all the leaves and at the ends are like a monkey with its tail going back towards the tree. And it has these rounded, knobby things on the bark often when it gets older too. So that's the bunya bunya, Araucaria bidwillii. Right next to it here is an older star pine. You can see how different the leaves are, very symmetrical and coming out of these flat, nice, feather-shaped sprays. So this is the Tasmanian tree fern, and we only have 2 ferns that are tree-like. It's the Australian tree fern and here the Tasmanian tree fern. On the Tasmanian tree fern, the way to distinguish it from the Australian one is that it has quite a few more fronds, probably twice as many. So you see it's kind of bushy on top. And if you look at the trunk, the petioles of the fronds are persistent. So there's a lot of, you can see someone has pruned off the old fronds and the stalks of the old fronds are left on the trunk. The trunk is thicker, but it's got those leftover stalks on it. This one's a pretty young one. It's got a little pup coming out the side on the bottom. That's what you see down there. But the rest is this little short, stout tree fern. Now if we go down here a little ways, still on Yananali Street, pretty close to the train station. See my face for a second. Good morning. I'm getting earlier and earlier here. It's like 7:30 on a Saturday morning. I had to talk to that guy first. Before we just saw the Tasmanian tree fern, I knocked on the door and let him know what I was doing, because who knows, they think I'm some weirdo running around. But here's an Australian tree fern. So it doesn't have quite as many fronds. I mean, but each of the fronds is much larger. This is also a taller, older specimen. And these get taller than the Tasmanian. But each of the fronds is probably, 6, 8 feet long. Lots of fuzzy stuff up where the fronds are coming out. But if you get down to the really older part of the trunk, trespassing here, you can see it's somewhat smooth. So there's not a lot of stalks. I mean, it gets a little junky up here, but not those really visible frond petioles, or I'm just saying stalks, stuck left on the tree. It's what we would call self-pruning. The fronds fall off, and where they were stuck to the tree, it's kind of a flatter surface. And I'm going to show you one more of these. That's right down the street, I think. I hope you are enjoying some of these videos. Okay, here's a few that look pretty good. So there's one there. There's a lot in this little front yard. But I'm going to get you close to the trunk. So this is the classic look of the Australian tree fern's trunk. Once the fronds fall off, they just leave what's called a scar. Very smooth. There's the fuzzy part. And if you looked under the fronds, you could see all those brown spots are where they produce the spores. So these, not gymnosperms, but they're thrown into this unit. So this one is Cyathea cooperi. I've never told you the scientific name of the Tasmanian, but you can look that up, so I don't want to say it and be confusing now, but there you go. Also down here near Pershing Park is a couple of specimens of the incense cedar, Calocedrus decurrens, and although these are not very common much anymore around here because our climate's getting warmer, I don't think they were ever really popular in Santa Barbara, but big, popular, and also important tree in the Pacific Northwest. A little oddity, I just thought I'd throw that in because it is a really interesting plant. But let's get closer and look at the leaves themselves. You can see the overall shape of this one. In the Pacific Northwest, these incense cedar trees are large timber trees, very large, hundreds of feet tall. But look, I'm trying to get you up close near these. They have scales that are flat against the stem, and they come off in these long sprays, but they kind of hang down near the end here, but you can kind of see they're flattened in these little sections, branches of flattened scales, red peely bark. There's lots of little teeny, I see male cones on this. I don't see any female at all. This is the incense cedar. And as you might guess, if you dry these little branches out and you can burn them, and they've been used historically by native peoples in the Pacific Northwest as an incense. Calocedrus decurrens. We're down here near Pershing Park, right across the street. This is the Mason Beach Inn, and it's a place we normally walk to with class to see these trees here lining the parking lot. Podocarpus Henckelii. They're nice, neat trees, kind of a nice rounded crown. They have a thinnish foliage, meaning that they're kind of nice. They look nice, but you can kind of see through them to be able to see maybe the parking lot and your car. It doesn't get too thick. Also, they don't get too tall, so they're not a problem for the buildings nearby. But let's take a closer look. These are all the same thing, Henckels Podocarpus. Let's take a closer look at the leaves. They're long and linear. I'm trying to get even closer here. About 6 to 8 inches long, thin, weeping. People like the weeping form in general. It kind of looks luxuriant and maybe like it grows near water. It's something always people are looking for in dry climates. Things like this tree that grows very well in drought conditions, disease resistant, and it looks though like it's kind of, from a wetter region. You can see the bark is really kind of small and got little almost square sections to it. If this was mixed in with other units, it might be kind of hard to distinguish between the Gaigera parviflora. There's that one that looks similar, although the leaves are shorter on that one. And maybe even the Acacia stenophylla, except there are no bean pods on this. This is not a legume. So for this unit, these long kind of almost sickle-shaped leaves, dangling form, the weeping form. This is Henckels Podocarpus. I just wanted to show you this nice specimen of a Pinus pinea, the Italian stone pine. I showed you a short, young one. This is an older one. Giant, big spreading canopy up top. Nice, tall trunk that raises it up. This is over the Orfila Early Childhood Learning Center for City College. But one of the really nice specimens. So this is how they get when they're much older. And really nice. This is the type of shape and age of the ones lining Anapamu Street. This is the dawn redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides. That's a long Latin name. Say that 3 times fast. So Metasequoia glyptostroboides, dawn redwood. This is a very close relative of our coast redwood, and this one was thought to be extinct until 1944. So there were fossil records of this tree, and we thought it was extinct. At least the Western scientific world did, and then they learned about how some were growing in this small village, around this small village in a province in China. So the people around there knew about the tree, but they didn't understand maybe how it was related to others or thought to be related. So relearned about in 1944, and since then it's become popular as a landscaping plant. They are a graceful tree, slightly drooping leaves, sprays of flat little leaflets on the leaves, a lot like the coast redwood, a lighter green color. This one is deciduous though, it's very interesting. This one's particular specimen you're looking at is getting ready to lose its leaves because it's the fall. Although here in Santa Barbara we don't get a lot of real cold snaps, so it doesn't get completely, the leaves don't fall completely. It usually retains some leaves. Let's get closer and look at the leaves. There are these compound pinnate leaves. Let me grab one for you. You can kind of see what they look like looking up through the light. And I'll get one up close for you. Compound, there's one leaf where I'm holding. They also have cones. They're gymnosperms, just like their counterparts. Let's go up the stairs here, and I usually can find one that's more at eye level. Just like the coast redwood, they have these small cones, about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. There's one that's green, and these will dry up and open up, and the seeds will come out. Let me see if I can find it. Dried up one for you. So that's what it looks like. Very similar to the coast redwood, but a little bit different. So that's the dawn redwood. A pretty, not too common, but a really interesting tree. This tree you're looking at is Pinus pinea, Italian stone pine. I'm doing this video myself, so I'm not going to be in it, but you might see some little sprites running around behind it. It's my daughter. So the Italian stone pine, this is a fairly young one, but it's still got the characteristic form, which is very umbrella shaped. You can see there's a main trunk, and then the branches start coming out, and it is very wide. So it tends to be wider in the canopy than it is tall, which makes it a really nice, like I said, umbrella shape for shade, planting under. Just the shape is really attractive, and the branching pattern. These get very large. They line Anapamu Street, like right by the high school, Santa Barbara High. Those were all planted, an old Spanish ranch and estate that used to be the driveway, Anapamu Street, up this ranch. So those trees have been maintained and replaced to give that look. One way to identify this is the shape, this really umbrella shaped. We've got a few of them on campus, but also if you look more closely at the tops, so like the new growth. The new growth, they kind of look like green bottle brushes, how the needles come out at the very tops. You can see it on that one too if you look closely. And this one too, just looking close at one. See how they're really vertical and all the needles are just sticking out kind of like a bottle brush. That's Italian stone pine. The cones aren't going to help you identify this one too much. They're kind of generic and they're not persistent, meaning they fall off. So this is a very young Italian stone pine, so it doesn't even have, you can't even see the trunk yet, but a little bit older. This is probably about 25 years old at the most. And people will cut the lower branches off to give them even more of a simple, kind of elegant architecture of branching and single trunk look. But yeah, these are really neat, and you can see them If you look up pictures of them, old ones, there's one across the street from City College that goes up probably about 30 or 40 feet of just trunk, and then it branches out in this wide canopy. Really cool. Italian stone pine, Pinus pinea. Big area here on campus in front of biology building. This is Taxodium hughelii. This kind of weeping, graceful, kind of want to say messy looking tree, but really it only looks messy because you don't see it from kind of the whole picture of overall. It's a nice weeping graceful tree, and it's a small one. It's also not in the right spot. It likes swampy kind of moisture waters, but it will do okay here. Ooh, I see a squirrel. There it goes. So let's look close. It's got these great little cones here, you can see. They're kind of like a juniper berry, about an inch round and green. Nicely, finely fissured bark, and the weeping form. If you get real close and look at the leaves too, you can see them. Let's try to get close to one here. Not focusing too well here, but the leaves are very, very fine, and you can see that, well, I don't know if you can, I can, that out of the tips of these things that look like pinnate leaves, there's growth. So if you think something's a leaf and you're not sure if it's compound or simple, you need to look to see if there's any buds or something that looks like that could grow out of that leaf. If something could grow out, like the tip keeps growing, that isn't a compound leaf. That's just a stem with lots of little leaves on it with more growth, because a leaf is a determinate organ. Nothing will grow out of it. It doesn't get bigger, or new leaves or branches don't come off of a leaf. So in this case, that's what we're looking at. We're looking lots of little teeny leaflets. They look kind of like they are compound pinnate leaves, but they're actually just, each one of those little teeny things is a leaf. So Montezuma cypress is the common name of this Taxodium hughelii, and I love it. Some of the big ones that you can see, not here, but in Mexico. It's the national tree of Mexico. And some of the trees there's ones that are hundreds of years old that are just so beautiful, huge weeping form. Check them out online if you ever get a chance, or if you ever visit Mexico and want to notice, you'll see them around. You know, think about it like what redwood tree is to California, that would be to Mexico, something that's important and everyone knows about. So, Montezuma cypress. Good morning. I have snuck onto campus here and I'm making a video for you. So the first of the trees that I want to show you here on campus is Pinus radiata. So this is the only one that's left on campus. When I started working here 13 years ago, there were probably about 5 or 6 that line this ridge, right kind of from the entrance of the campus out towards the ocean. This is one of the only ones left. So Monterey Pine has its native range. It's native to California, and it's the central coast up in the mountains and down towards the coast too. So it can live near the ocean, but also on 2 islands off of Baja California, Guadalupe Island and Cedros Island. So the way you can tell the Monterey Pine, let me get a little closer, is one, it's got these tiers of branches. A few branches come off in one spot and then nothing, and then a few more tiered branches. But the reason it's called Pinus radiata, the radiating pine cones. So its cones are attached to the stem or the branch. There's a few of them, usually 3 or 4 in one spot, just like the branches are coming off in tiers. The cones are coming off in tiers also. So let's see if we can get up real close here. I'm trying not to fall down to the PE building. So look right there. You can see there's 3 cones all in one spot. in different little locations along the same zone there. So they're radiating out, and the cones are pointing outward, down. They're just pointing away from the center of the stem. That's why it's called radiata. If you're looking for the needles, I'm just pointing you towards the ground here. Always look to see how many needles there are per bundle. So here we've got, I'll put it on this on the bench here, but you can see there's actually two sets there, but this little brown nub at the bottom here is called the fascicle. So it joins the needles in this little bundle, and there are just 2 needles per bundle. That's another way you can identify and distinguish pines, how many needles per bundle. I mean, there's a lot of them that have 2 needles per bundle or 3 needles per bundle, so it's not always, you know, super distinctive thing, but it's another thing you can think about. So that's Pinus radiata. They are actually really pretty trees. The reason they're dying off is because of, again, fungal and viral infections. Our temperatures are changing slowly. We don't have as much fog here as we used to on the mesa, and it makes them more stressed, which is getting them more prone to diseases. So this one's hanging on, but it's a native, which is great, and it's a tree that, you know, grows naturally all over the Central Coast. So I always like all the natives. That's it, and we will continue with a few more species here on campus. Okay, next let's do the Torrey Pine. Torrey Pines, we're approaching one. They are native to the Channel Islands and small parts of the mainland, like a little area near San Diego called Torrey Pine State Park. They were once much more widespread on the mainland, and now they're existing in these little patches and on the some of the Channel Islands because it's cooler and a little bit moister from the fog out there. So they're somewhat a remnant of a cooler climate. Anyhow, they're popular right now because, as I've said in other videos, some of our other non-native pines, like Canary Island pine, are not doing too well during the temperatures getting warmer and less fog, and there's diseases that come in. These ones are hardier, and the Torrey pines are actually really beautiful. They have a little bit of a bluish gray color. Get up close. They have a very long needle, not as long as the Canary Island pine, but pretty long. And if we look close enough, we can see that there are 5 needles. Well, this one only has 3. There are usually 5 needles per bundle. That's the only pine in this unit that has 5 needles per bundle. The other ways to distinguish it are the bluish color. Oh, there's some homeless pants. The bluish color, the large cones, and the overall architecture. It's got low branching. And this one's a pretty old one, probably about 30 years old here, overlooking the track and the stadium. Cones are large. I know you can just see a silhouette of those, but mainly what you're going to look for is this bluish colored large needled pine that has 5 needles per bundle. That's the Torrey Pine, Pinus torreyana. These here I'm showing you are in the Lifescape Garden overlooking the stadium. So for this video, I wanted to compare these 2 pines. This is the Canary Island pine, Torrey pine. They're both of the 2 pines in this unit that have long needles. Those are these 2, Torrey pine and Canary Island pine. The Torrey pine, I'm getting closer to here. Look up there at the tops. The needles are long, but they are fairly rigid, so they're not bending, they're sticking straight. And it gives the overall look of this pine a different look. It's not fuzzy, kind of pom-pom like looking. So straight needles in the Torrey Pine. Now, over towards the bookstore, getting closer looking to the Canary Island Pine. It also has long needles, but each needle is thinner and longer. So it has this kind of pom-pom look, kind of puffy on the edges. That's because the needles are bending slightly. They're a little more flexible and they arc away from the stem, giving it that fuzzy look. So that's the Canary Island Pine. You can tell it's a pine, any layperson could, because there's needles and there's cones. And you know where you are, you're in Southern California. If it has this kind of look, it's got to be the Canary Island Pine. There really aren't any others with long needles that look like this. Okay, here back by the cafeteria, you ever noticed this mural? I'm sure you've noticed it, but have you really looked at it on campus? It's really neat. It depicts all kinds of interesting cultural dynamics that have gone on historically and not. Some of it's a little disturbing, as some of our history should be. Very, very cool. Well, that's not the plant I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you this one up here near what is called the ESL building. This is Podocarpus elongatus variety icy blue. So what we've got here is, we've seen a couple of podocarpi, the Frocarpus Graciliar, which is very, very closely related to Podocarpus. And I showed you a hedge of that in a different video. This one, similar linear small leaves. It has berry-like cones that sit on a little foot. The cones are on a little stalk, which we will not see them here right now. They're very tiny. But this one is a newer, more popular Podocarpus because of its bluish color. So like I said in a different video, the Podocarpi are kind of an older time, 20, 30 years ago, 40, people were planting them more. Frocarpus Graciliar was popular, and you see them as large trees now. This is one that's new on the market, and it's because of its color. It was bred, hybridized, and messed with genetically, so it has this bluish color. Why would people want this? I mean, you kind of look at it, it's like, okay, it's interesting, kind of. It's kind of looks thick and hard and just shrubby. There's nothing super pretty or special about it, but it's a great hedge plant, super disease tolerant, drought tolerant, can handle poor soils, and it is blue. So it's a color, people like more colors in their landscape, in the foliage than they used to. It used to be, back when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, people wanted color in the flowers of their landscape plants. And that's still true now, but also we've got more colors coming into the foliage. Like we've got the eastern redbud, the forest pansy, which is all purple. So all the leaves instead of green are purple. Got lots of things that have been genetically changed and bred to be more colorful, and this is one of them. So a bluish gray color to this Podocarpus elongatus icy blue. Check it out. All right, we're here in the Lifescape Garden again. Panning over to a couple of Podocarpus species. This big green fuzzy ball one is the Podocarpus elongatus. The way this one can be distinguished from other Podocarpi and from Frocarpus is the long leaves. They're 3 to 5 inches long. Podocarpus elongatus, the leaves are elongated. They also are very glossy green, unlike the Frocarpus Graciliar that has the kind of almost bluish look and really light green new growth. This doesn't have that. It's all dark glossy green. But like the other Podocarpuses, or Podocarpi, as one would say, they are very thick foliage, really good for hedging. Have you ever heard of topiary? Topiary is like when you take a shrub and you prune it to look like something, like Mickey Mouse or a mushroom or something. And we've joked about trying to make this one into something. It's just a big green ball. But very vigorous grower, very thick foliage. This one is actually pretty and is also used as a hedge plant. Not as popular as Frocarpus Graciliar for a hedge plant, but still popular. Its common name is brown pine. Not really very memorable. There you go. This is another oddball Podocarpus, and you won't see it much in landscaping at all, but it is here in the Lifescape Garden as something to kind of round out our Podocarpus collection, and it's Podocarpus totara. It's a small tree. You can kind of see the trunk in there, the branches kind of pointing upward and outward. In its native habitat in New Zealand, it's a lumber tree, one of the most important lumber trees there, like pines would be to us. It's over 100 feet tall, has very, very small leaves compared to the elongatus, the Podocarpus elongatus that we just saw, and even to the Frocarpus graciliar, and even to the Podocarpus elongatus icy blue. Here are the little leaves. It also has cones. So this is a very small specimen of the Podocarpus totara compared to what it would normally be found in its wild habitat. Totara pine. I think I see a cone, so I'm going to try to get in close. You can kind of see that little red thing. So the red thing is an aril. It's the foot. It's the podo in Latin means foot, like a podiatrist. It's a foot doctor. And that is the little foot that the cone sits on. The green thing right there is the cone, and the red thing is the aril. So carpus means the fruit. So it's the foot that the fruit sits on. And that's what all of these Podocarpus have in common, the way they produce their cone on that little aril. All right, as we approach this plant right outside in front of the Humanities building, get a closer look. Let me get the white building behind it. This is the blue Atlas cedar. Really beautiful architecture of this tree. Nice. It's a very young one, so it's still kind of tall and linear looking. What happens as they get older is the upper branches, of course, get longer and they spread out and have a little bit more of a kind of a pyramidal look to them. But really pretty. There used to be a bigger one here, and when they built the Humanities building, the water irrigation was off out here, kind of near the bike rack. And so that tree died and they planted a new one, and this was taken hold. It's been a few years now, so it's doing okay. This is Cedrus atlantica glauca. So glauca is the variety meaning. There's a Cedrus atlantica that's native to the Atlantis Mountains in North Africa. That's where this is native to, its ancestors. But this was a bluish kind of glauca, bluish white cultivar that has been formed, as people think it's really pretty. Let's get a closer look. You can kind of see the bluish color up close, and the needles come out in these little, almost like pin cushions, little sprays. But mostly what people really like about this tree is the branching architecture. Really kind of neat how the branches are separated and spreading out horizontally, almost like you might get like a holiday tree so you could hang ornaments on it. But yeah, just really neat looking, and you can see through it if you want to be able to, have it in your yard but not have it block the view. It's kind of an interesting, beautiful look. They're hardy because they're pines. They're used to they're drought tolerant. It's not a pine, but it's in that same gymnosperm. They have needles, which are very good at conserving water, not a lot of transpiration. It's also, this one is used a lot in Asian style gardening, maybe Japanese sometimes. You see them bonsai'd at times too. So this is Cedrus atlantica glauca, blue Atlas cedar. Here's another short clip of the Aleppo pine, Pinus halepensis. You can see some of the cones that look kind of like a jalapeno, green, cylindrical, but lots of cones that remain on the tree. If you look through this, all those little brown blobs are cones, so highly persistent cones. All right, still for this video on campus. Haven't been on campus for a while. It's still pretty empty here, but yeah, I miss being on campus. The hustle and the bustle and the smell of bacon in the morning coming from the cafeteria. Well, here we are. This is the bread palm, and it's kind of a mouthful scientifically to say. Encephalartos altensteinii. This, again, the bread palm. Right across from the biology building, you can see some of the sago palms. So they're right next to each other because they're both, there's actually this garden here in front of the biological building is what you might call like a Jurassic Park. You know, it's meant to have plants that are from the ancient times on Earth, from the dinosaur times. And both of these, the bread palm and the sago palm, were around, have been around on Earth for a long, long time. Great old fossils of them. So anyways, this one is the Encephalartos. How it's different from the sago palm is that it has fewer fronds or leaves. These are all compound pinnate leaves. Fewer leaves, and the leaflets are thicker and wider on this one. And they have little spines on the tips too. Kind of hard to see, but they're spine tipped. And it also will have large cones for reproduction. But that's the bread palm. Encephalartos altensteinii. Well, here we are in the tropical section of the Lifescape Garden. And I almost am hesitant to even include this one, but this is the hammock fern, and it's not looking too good. It's pretty dried up looking, but it's here, and it's can look better. If you look closely at some of these fronds, they're nice short fronds. It's low growing, like less than maybe 12 inches high. If this was well watered, this looks like it's gotten dried out a few times. Our irrigation system here in the Lifescape Garden works sometimes, and then it's off sometimes. The water gets turned off. But anyways, the new growth in a really healthy little patch, the new growth on this hammock fern is reddish, and then the leaves turn green as they age, and that's what makes this really pretty. When you have a nice patch, you see this reddish. Some of the fronds are reddish and some are green. But this is Blechnum occidentale hammock fern. And this is our little patch of it, and the reason I'm showing you this patch and maybe not a better one is I have not seen any around except at Lotus Land. Although it is a fairly good popular plant, maybe not so much right now. People aren't planting things that require kind of regular and plus more water. So this is our sample of that. So here's back to this one. Just test yourself. Which pine is this? I'll give you 5 seconds. You're right, Italian stone pine. And just for fun, I see this blooming right at its feet. Now, this is a really pretty bulb that comes up often this time of year in the fall, and it puts out its flowering stalk and flowers before any leaves. So for that reason, in the past, it's not politically correct to say the name that it used to be called, that it was called a naked lady. So these, because they don't have any leaves that come up, I think it's hopefully being renamed, you know, something like unclothed partner. So it's a little bit more politically correct, but they are really pretty. Okay, here's a couple of tests for you. What are these trees? Really pretty dark green, nice conical shape. The branches sticking out fairly horizontally. These are young ones of this species all along the Humanities building here on campus. What do you think those are? I'll give you 5 seconds to figure that out. You're right. They're Monterey Cypress. They're young ones. And we've got a lot of them popping up around here. I'm not sure you can see it, but behind that California pepper tree is the grandma. That's an old Monterey Cypress here on campus next to the Humanities building. It's really rather sickly looking now, as a lot of them are. You know, our logo for City College used to have a Monterey Cypress on it, but as the weather has changed, the Monterey Cypress have mostly died off. We used to have a lot along Cliff Drive right along campus. They're mostly died off, and kind of following that, our logo has changed. It doesn't have one on it anymore. But this one has been here even before City College was here, so over 100 years old. And when they went to build the Humanities building, they had to dig into the ground, but they didn't disturb the roots of that, although they disturbed some other things. They tried to retain that tree. So it's the Monterey Cypress. This is what they look like when they're young. And you've already seen that in a different video.